Hello everyone, I'm Jake.
I'm Demi.
Welcome to our channel Jake and Demi. And the topic for today's video is spousal sponsorship or spouse visa. Now all of you who are madly in love with each other just like me and Demi and want to be together in Canada, this video is going to be very important for you. Reason being, we are discussing three important aspects of spousal sponsorship in this video. The categories, the three different categories which are recognized by IRCC for spousal sponsorship or spousal visa, and the eligibility criteria for the sponsor and the person who is going to get sponsored. Also, the most critical part of this entire process, whether to go for inland application process or the outland application process. In this video, I will explain you in detail what are the pros and cons of inland and outland process. So let's start this video right away, starting with the number one, the types of relationships. So that's how my wife keeps spinning me around everywhere. Boys, are you sure that you want to sponsor your wife and get her to Canada? Hey, come on, I'm just kidding. Marriage is a beautiful relationship. I'm madly in love with my wife. She is the reason that I'm in Canada and she has made my life so much more meaningful. Now coming back to the point, three different categories in which you can sponsor apply for spousal sponsorship. Number one, marriage. Spouse, a person to whom you're legally married. If you're married in Canada, then provide the provincial certificate. If you're married in your country of origin, then provide the marriage certificate which is valid and legal in that country. In case you don't have any children, then even after the visa application process and getting PR, you still have to maintain that marital status for at least 2 years. Otherwise, the PR status of the person who is sponsored will be revoked. Unless otherwise, if the person can prove that there was domestic abuse or ignorance on part of the sponsor. Now let's move on to the common law partner, the second category. Common law partner, basically you have to be in a committed relationship with the person and at least for a year live under the same roof in the same house. In this case, you need to provide a lot of supporting documents like receipts, bills, phone bills, electricity bills, rental agreements or joint ownership of property in both your names. Anything that can prove that you have been together in a you can call it a live-in relationship also. Now let's talk about the conjugal partner. In case of conjugal partner, you have to be in a committed relationship for at least 1 year or longer, but not necessarily living in the same house because of certain reasons which force both of you to live apart. These reasons could be immigration, it could be society, norms and traditions, or various other reasons. You have to prove to the immigration officer, though you're in a committed relationship, but you could not live together. Okay, so now we are clear about these three types of categories. There are different documents which you should always keep handy, like I mentioned marriage certificate, then photographs of couple, then text messages exchanged between couples, phone call records, even Facebook status to declare your relationship is counted. Different documents, always keep them handy. In this case, the visa processing fees is around $1,000. And alright guys, so now let's move on to the eligibility criteria for the sponsor and the person who needs to be sponsored. Let me first find my beautiful wife, my spouse, waiting for me there eating the lemon cake. Till then, you guys see on the screen the eligibility criteria. Alright, so guys, now you're clear about the eligibility criteria. Let's now talk about the most critical part of this whole process where people often get confused. Is about the outland application process and the inland application process. Okay, let me first define these two. In case of outland sponsorship, you sponsor your spouse who does not live in Canada but they live in their country of origin or in some country where they have been living legally for at least 1 year. The whole documentation process will start in that country in the visa office which is responsible for that country, not in Canada. In case if your spouse is in Canada, even on a visitor visa, in that case also you can start the outland process, but there is a caveat because like I mentioned earlier, the whole documentation and the application process starts in the country, in the visa office of that country of origin or their country where they are legally living for last 1 year. So it's going to be a hassle doing the documentation while you're in Canada. It's better to start outland sponsorship from the other country. Alright, so now let's talk about the inland sponsorship. In case of inland sponsorship, your spouse is already living with you in Canada either on work permit, on visit visa or study permit. They should have a legal status to live in Canada. In that case, you can start your spousal sponsorship while they are in Canada, and the documentation and the application process will be in Canada itself. This is the basic outline of both the outland and the inland visa application process. Now let's talk about the advantages and disadvantages of both these processes. Let's first start with outland process. Let's say in case of outland sponsorship, the biggest advantage is that of course the processing time is less. Sometimes you get it in 8 months and maximum 12 months because there is an emotional ground. Couples are apart from each other and the government want them to be together as soon as possible. This is one of the biggest advantages. Second advantage is that in case of outland visa application, your spouse has the flexibility to travel from Canada back to their home country in case of any emergency. They would not be denied re-entry back into Canada. They can easily get the visitor visa. This is the biggest advantage. Now what are the disadvantages? The disadvantages, there are not many. I think one biggest disadvantage is that in outland application process, you both have to be apart from each other if your spouse is in their home country. That is the biggest disadvantage. And then it is advisable also, if your spouse wants to come to Canada during the process, it's better to first cross the first stage of application, because in that case you will not be denied visitor visa. You will easily get it because you have your supporting document to show that you have already applied for PR. Then another disadvantage is that after first stage of application, if you come to Canada on visitor visa, you will not be allowed to work here. You will not have a provincial health insurance, driver license and various other things. But I think in the second stage of application process, there are hardly 3 or 4 months left. So it's not actually a very big disadvantage. Now let's talk about the advantages and disadvantages of the inland sponsorship. In case of inland sponsorship, the biggest advantage that you have when you apply for the sponsorship is that your spouse is eligible to get the open work permit, and while you apply for the application for sponsorship, apply for the open work permit at that same time. It takes only 4 to 5 months for the processing, and your spouse has open work permit. In this case, you don't even need a job offer, and your spouse can work for any employer in Canada. So while your sponsorship process is going on, he or she can gain the valuable Canadian work experience and also financially support you during that entire process. So which in my opinion is a very big advantage of inland sponsorship. Now another advantage obviously is that you both can be together while the process is going on. You don't have to be away from each other. Now let's talk about the disadvantages of the inland sponsorship. The biggest disadvantage that I see is that in case of inland sponsorship, you lose the flexibility of traveling from Canada to your home country, because that's how it is. You need a visitor visa, and it depends on the immigration officer if they give you that visitor visa in this case or not. If you're denied entry back into Canada, in case if you're traveling back to home country, then in that case even your sponsorship will be revoked and your entire hard work and effort goes to waste. So it's a very big risk in case of inland sponsorship. Only if you're 100% sure in your mind that you don't want to go back to your country till you get your PR, apply for the inland sponsorship, because it has many plus points. Though I've read in some cases people after getting open work permit, they have traveled back to their country for a week or 2 weeks and they got their visitor visa to come back into Canada. But again, it's a very big risk. You need to be sure about it with your immigration officer whether you should go out of country or not. Another disadvantage is that while you are here, even though you have open work permit, even though you're working, but you still are not eligible for the provincial health insurance till you get your PR, and you can't get your driver license also. So these are few disadvantages of inland sponsorship. Okay, between these two, another disadvantage that inland process has is the processing time. In case of inland sponsorship, the processing time is much longer. In some cases, it's done in 12 months. In some cases, it takes up to 18 months to 20 months. So it varies according to different situations. So weigh your options accordingly and decide the best application process for yourself. Let me find my spouse now and conclude this video. So now we have understood the pros and cons of both inland and outland application processes. You are now the best judge in your particular situation to decide which approach you want, and as per your situation, take the best decision. We both wish you all the best and be with your loved one, your spouse, as soon as possible. See you guys next time.